I'm going to get started and say good afternoon, everybody, from the Textile Institute in Manchester, UK, and welcome to today's session of day 2 of Tea with a TI. Thank you for joining us today, and welcome back as well to those who joined us yesterday for our first session. And again, for those who have not had the pleasure to meet, I'm Stephanie Dick. I'm the CEO at the Textile Institute. Just as an introduction to the webinar series, over the last few months, the TI team, with a number of its sections and special interest groups, have been looking at those key topics and inquiries that we've received, both COVID and non-COVID related, and we've put together this webinar series, Tea with the TI, so that we can share this information with you all. We've received kind of an unprecedented number of inquiries from around the world, and we hope that the series of seminars helps to address these inquiries. So just a few housekeeping notes. To remind everyone, we'll be recording the session, but a version of the webinar, all 3 webinars, will be emailed out at the end of the week to you all. The timing as well for today is approximately an hour. And after both presentations, you'll be invited to ask your questions. For those that are familiar with Zoom and its set up, please feel free to ask your questions in the Q&A feature on Zoom as the presentations take place. And for those that are not familiar with the Zoom setup, you'll find this at the bottom of your screen if you just move your mouse down to the bottom of the screen. The chair of the session will monitor the Q&A throughout the presentation. But if we don't get a chance to answer your question, we'll forward these to the presenters over the next few days, and we'll be happy to respond and engage following the webinar. And then if you'd like to ask your question in person as well after each presentation, please indicate this, and Robin, who has control of us all in the session, will be able to unmute you. I just want to also take a moment to thank Taylor and Francis, who are our sponsors of this webinar series. We're very grateful for them supporting our first webinar series. So now I'd like to introduce Helen Rowe, who I've had the pleasure of working under for many years in a role as chairman of the Textile Institute. Helen is a chartered textile technologist who has been a member of the Textile Institute since her student days. And as a young professional, she focused her expertise on the laboratory assessment of textile materials. Subsequently carving a career in higher education, Helen became part of the faculty senior management team and an academic board member of Manchester Metropolitan University. Helen is a fellow and a companion of the Textile Institute, a past chairman of the Institute's Professional Qualifications Committee, vice chairman of the Manchester and Cheshire section, and an active member of all of the Institute's standing committees. And Helen is also editor of the TI's professional publication book series. Helen was elected to the Governing Council in 2010, and she spent 2 terms as its chairman. So please welcome the Vice President of the Textile Institute, Helen Rowe. So I'll just switch off my camera and microphone now, and I'll hand over to you, Helen. And I hope that you all enjoys today's session. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephanie, for that introduction. I have to apologise to everyone that my broadband seems to be cutting out occasionally. So if it does, I hope somebody will tell me that you've not been able to hear me or you've not been able to see me. That might be the better of the 2 options. But welcome everyone to the second in this series of webinars entitled Tea with the TI. And as Stephanie has already said, we're extremely grateful to publishers Taylor and Francis for sponsoring this event. Now, I've been asked to chair this event today, not because I'm Vice President of the Institute or because I'm a former Chairman of Council, but because of my involvement with the Manchester and Cheshire section. I'm aware that we have some delegates joining us from overseas, but I've no doubt that everyone will know that Textile Institute headquarters is, and for the past 110 years, has been located in Manchester. The Manchester and Cheshire section is operated by a group of members resident here in the Northwest. And we have over the years hosted great guest lectures. We've arranged visits to interesting textile related venues. We've presented seminars on specific topics like our quadrennial IPMA review. But more recently, we've been focusing on our younger members and specifically students. And we've organised a couple of conferences at which research students from anywhere, not just in the northwest of England, could present their research in a supportive and non-judgmental environment. Now, as with any large-scale conference, they've had to submit abstracts of their work, which have been scrutinised by a conference committee, as they would be at any large-scale conference. And if successful, they've presented their work to an audience made up of perhaps fellow students, their academic supervisors, and also representatives from industry. And we've awarded prizes for the best oral and best poster presenters. Now, this was a model that we hope to repeat, obviously, in 2020, but, well, you know what happened. Anyway, we're hoping to get another conference off the ground in 2021, even if it has to be virtual. And I hope you'll keep your eyes open for announcements about it. So I have to say, you're in for a real treat this afternoon. We've managed to bag two excellent presenters today, Adrian Wilson and Barbara Shepard. Although I'm sure both of them are well known to you, I'm confident that you'll find what they have to say is not only interesting, as it always is when they speak, but very informative and I think very thought-provoking. As Stephanie mentioned, if you want to ask questions, I'm sure there'll be many. If you could post these on the question and answer function on your screen. After each presenter is finished, I'll run through these and I'll let the speakers answer them live. And as Stephanie said, if we get too many questions, then we'll pass them on to the speakers and they'll perhaps email you their responses. Now, both topics today are related really to the most basic of items that have been so crucial in the battle against the current pandemic. But as you'll see, one of them has a global perspective and the other one a more regional one. Later, Barbara is going to tell us about the ways in which Manchester Metropolitan University has helped to redesign a protective apron for healthcare professionals with the help of healthcare professionals. Well, first of all, let me introduce to you Adrian Wilson. Adrian is an analyst and writer specialising in technical textiles, non-wovens and composite industries. He's editor of Non-Wovens International and he's also a tutor on the Textile Institute's short course, Introduction to Textiles. He's owner of AWOL Media, or AWOL Media, and the consulting editor for Sustainable Nonwovens, International Filtration News, Smart Textiles and Wearables, and Innovation in Textiles, whilst contributing to many other technical journals and websites. He's going to talk to us today about how and why a humble fabric reached the top of the political agenda in 2020. Really looking forward to hearing this. So over to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Helen. Thanks very much. I'll just share my screen with everyone now. Yep, I think we have that. So again, I'd like to thank the Textile Institute for inviting me here this afternoon, and I'm looking forward to working with the team going forward on these short courses and sort of introducing people to the wonderful world of non-wovens, which is the main industry I'm involved in. There's been quite a big story to tell, obviously, during 2020 from this industry. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, I'll try and keep it to a minimum and nutshell everything. I'll start with a couple of my favourite quotes from this year. If it will work, yeah. So The USA has a strategic petroleum reserve. It has strategic military assets. Where are the strategic melt-blown assets? That was from Forbes magazine back in April this year. Second one is from the Financial Times in May. Forget gold, forget copper, silver and steel. The hottest commodity of the coronavirus crisis is a little-known synthetic fabric called melt-blown. We have the two pictures there on the right. At the top, we've got President Macron, who's actually touring a face mask and non-woven converting plant over in France to reassure his citizens that everything's under control. Down at the bottom, the gentleman needs no introduction whatsoever. Once again, he's sending off an angry tweet, and this time it's to 3M, which is up until, well, still is by far the biggest supplier of respiratory face masks in the world. Mr. Trump can't quite understand why 3M operates on an international platform and can't simply donate all of its face masks directly to the USA. So at the start of 2020, I think it's probably fair to say that very few people outside certain professions knew what PPE actually was. And it's fair to say that most do now. But as we know, PPE manufacturing migrated to Asia from the West over the past 40 years, really, along with the rest of the textiles industry. Oh God, what was that going back? Yeah, so some figures here say it all, really. These are figures from the USA which kind of explain the situation. Many disposable medical items like surgical gowns, scrubs, caps, shoes, covers and bedding all have to be sewn by hand, which is why they're being allowed to migrate. Labour rates for sewing machinists in the USA, pretty similar to Europe, average about $10 an hour compared to $1 in China. So consequently, in 2019, the US alone imported 92.5 million dozen packs of disposable medical apparel. That's 1.1 billion items directly from China. And that figure doesn't even include face masks, which have been consumed globally at a rate of 129 billion a month around the world since back in March. The medical institutions were, however, supposed to keep emergency stockpiles, but I'll come on to that in a second. But anyway, at the start of this year, the pipeline of all that supply from China to the West was simply cut off. Now, nonwovens, for those who don't maybe know all that much about them, differ from other textiles generally by being turned from fibers or polymer resins directly into fabrics. So there's no yarn spinning stage. It's fast and it's cost effective. And we can generally divide nonwovens into three major categories, which are dry laid, wet laid and spun laid. Forgive me if I'm teaching anyone to suck eggs here. I just thought I'd better get a general background in. So to simplify just a little, dry laid materials have their origins in textiles and wet laid materials in paper making. Again, that's oversimplifying it. But like textiles, they're based on staple fibers overall. Spun melt materials, which is spun bond and melt blown materials, are extruded from polymer resins like plastics. These spun bond and melt blown materials are often combined on multiple beam machines to exploit the properties of both types of non-woven web, known as SMS in the trade, spun bond, melt blown, spun bond. And the biggest market for these products by far is the absorbent hygiene products industry. AHPs. These are baby diapers, femcare products like sanitary pads and panty liners, and those for coping with adult incontinence. It's by far the biggest grouping of non-wovens products. And while estimates for the retail value of this market vary significantly, it currently evens out at around a $90 billion market. Broken down, baby diapers are worth around 49 billion, Femcare products worth around 32 billion, and adult incontinence products worth about 9 billion. Now, while the demand for face masks was exploding, the markets for all of these products also boomed from March, not least due to panic buying. But the big players in this field were unable to help much with melt-blown supplies, even though they had these dedicated beams, because they were tied into long-term contracts for supplying products, as we see in the photos on the right. The melt-blowing process itself, developed in the 1950s by the USA Naval Research Laboratory, it's used exclusively to produce webs based on microfibers, generally in the range of about 2 to 4 microns. This fineness enhances the softness, the cover, the opacity, and the porosity of the webs obtained, making them also suitable for a range of filtration applications. And just how unique these melt-blown fabrics actually are has only became apparent with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic and that immediate global shortage of medical grade face masks. Because certain melt-blown grades are currently alone in achieving the necessary filtration efficiency, and at the same time being cheap enough to be used in masks for frontline workers, that's specifically respiratory masks. I mean, you can use nanofibers, obviously, but you're getting nowhere near the price you need. For the respirator type of face masks specified for these frontline workers, the protection level is designated generally N95 in the USA and FFP2 and 3 in Europe. I won't go too much into those. We can talk about that in greater detail some other time. The latest production rates on a Rykerfill 5 system, which you'll see a part of on the right there. Spun bond, you're getting 270 kilograms per meter of beam width per hour of a Rykerfill 5 line. Melt blown, you're getting 70 kilograms per meter of beam width per hour. So as you can see, melt blown's already a bottleneck for products like diaper producers, even before this demand for face masks exploded this year. Also, in order to be effective, the melt-blown layers in face masks have to be electrostatically charged. When they lose the charge over time, they no longer work. So they also have to be stored properly. And this is why a lot of the stockpile masks were just simply no good. So suddenly supplies of these materials for face masks just ran out, and panic was the result. These are the figures that when I do the short course trying to introduce people into non-wovens and get them interested, these are the figures I'm going to use, because I think this perfectly shows why you should be interested. It's on the money. Between March and June this year, the price for a ton of melt-blown fabric in China climbed from around $2,800 a ton to $56,500 at the height of the pandemic in May. That's simply breathtaking. But this is what this material was commanding. And in the first 5 months of 2020, over 70,000 new companies registered to make or trade in face masks in China. Over 7,000 new companies at the same time registered to make or trade in melt-blown non-wovens. Now, we're aware everybody wanted to do something to help alleviate the shortages. Major Western corporations entered the field like BMW, Bosch, Cummins, Ford, Milliken, New Armour, Nike. Many more pivoted production lines where they could. And the major luxury brands and retail brands got in the act too, all across Europe. Gucci, H&M, Louis Vuitton, Prada, Zara, all opened up the supply networks and exploited contacts with suppliers in China. But chaos absolutely reigned. There are a few more things that happened. French and German officials started accusing the USA of using Wild West tactics and a policy of modern piracy. Stories emerged of shady US operatives halting planes on runways with cases full of cash. Mass consignments were being escorted from factories to airports by armed guards. And the air freight rates out of China for mass consignments went up at least 5 times. Drug dealers and other criminal elements started to move in on the market. And of course, Donald Trump sent off some more angry tweets. So since then, virtually every Western country has put in measures to establish its own supplies of both face masks and melt-blown non-wovens backed by government support. Here in the UK, both Don and Lowe and Berry Global have installed dedicated melt-blown lines at considerable cost, and many face mask ventures have also commenced. Across Europe, it's estimated that the production of face masks has increased 20-fold to 1.5 billion 3-layer respiratory masks a month. And to some extent, prices have now stabilized a little bit. Being agreed that reliance on China can no longer be acceptable for the supply of PPE. There's even been excited talk of a benchmark being set for the onshoring of PPE in other areas of manufacturing where it makes strategic sense. Here are a couple of other recent quotes from conferences I've attended in Europe. This is the first one from Sebastian van der Loo at Goetze. The healthcare buying organisations are the key to ensuring the longevity of the PPE supply chains that have been established this year in Europe and the USA. At the height of the pandemic, prices were sky high, but now they are normalising, and these buyers are again looking at China's prices and expecting to pay what they did before the pandemic. They're buyers, have their Excel spreadsheets, and at the end of the year, they want their bonuses. If the price is the only deciding factor, we'll see a lot of the initiatives fade away in the next 2 years. And here's Hosuk Lee Makiyami at the European Centre for International Political Economy. During the pandemic, politicians talked a lot about decoupling their interests and firming up national sovereignty. We've heard a lot about that recently. But after the PPE shortages, businesses were doing the opposite. In general, industries like non-wovens are investing more in China, which is currently where the growth is. The market response to the PPE shortages has been mainly about diversification. In general, foreign investments and production capacities are moving to China and not vice versa. There's been much talk of the repatriation of supply chains, but I don't see it. So in conclusion, PPE shortages have exposed a major fault line in the globalized world order that existed before COVID-19 and is already being forensically scrutinized for the future. Many questions are going to be asked in the next few years. And then finally, sooner or later, it's going to be time to address the issue of environmental impact of the world's complete reliance on yet more single-use plastic-based products. And how do we go about that? That's me done, thank you. Any questions, anyone? I'm happy to help with.
Well, thank you very much, Adrian. That was super, and I'm sure there will be lots of questions. I'm looking at the moment, I can't see any listed, perhaps they're waiting until Barbara's spoken as well. But one of the things I was going to ask you is, as he quite rightly said, stocks of face masks quickly depleted as there was sort of panic buying across the world. But then after a while, of course, at national level and more locally, countries started to organise their own supplies. Now, it's not just the masks themselves, of course, it is the actual product that goes into the mask. And as you've been saying, the melt-blown materials are key to that. But even before you start the melt-blowing process, you need a raw material. Do you know if the stocks of that basic raw material have been depleted, and what we're going to do to ensure there's sufficient to feed the melt-blown lines wherever they are?
Well, at the moment, it's all based on polypropylene. fibre at the moment, and they are pretty robust, are they? And I know companies like Cork in the USA have been working around the clock and got established very, very quickly to make sure there certainly was enough polypropylene. I don't think that's such a big problem. The plastics corporations are still investing so much money in the raw materials for plastics production, and it's very odd that we're still at this stage talking about, oh great, there's going to be loads more plastics. You know, I think I saw a figure that the Alliance for Plastics, for Sustainable Plastics, or whatever it's called, it's the big chemicals conglomerate anyway, with all the big players on. They're investing about 3 to 4 billion over the next 5 years in initiatives to make plastics more sustainable. But at the same time, there's going to be 500 billion invested in more plastics raw materials production. So that kind of puts it into perspective, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Adrian. We have a couple of questions now. Simon Burnett Boothroyd is asking about, what about certification and policing this?
Oh yeah, that's another big area. Certification at the moment is certainly, as if he's involved in the process, he'll know, can be very long-winded. And of course was exacerbated by the situation of there being so much demand and so many people wanting to enter the market. You know, all the testing houses, I think in the USA, there was probably only 5 attributed testing houses for face masks. And they were simply snowed under. You know, their backlog was immense. On the question of policing, who knows? Who knows? I wouldn't like to hazard a guess. You know, how is that going to be done? I think I alluded to it in the presentation. I think a big problem is public procurement is all over the place. Everything's separate. A lot of these things are being ordered by individual healthcare regions, hospitals, departments, all with their eye on price. There's no infrastructure in for guaranteeing. I think it's probably something Barbara will talk about probably more than I. You know, it just gets back down to money, and they will go back to China. And China has certainly invested in the ability to keep supplying the world forever if it comes down to it. So it's whether we allow ourselves to be reliant in the face of the next crisis, if we ever get out of this one, indeed.
Which may only be round the corner, of course.
I
hope that satisfies Simon for now. I'm sure, Simon, you can come back and ask another question later if you like. And a second question from B. Frank Moore. How does the consumer know what is a safe mask that meets the necessary standards?
Well, this has been a problem from the start, really. I mean, there's a split between what's deemed safe for the consumer, and what is safe, what is required for use. You know, it's generally respiratory versus consumer masks. Now, they've got to have electrostatically charged melt-blown layer in the middle of them. I think really what's at the back of this, if you remember, the government continued to say there was no proof whatsoever that masks were effective until they finally buckled under the weight of all evidence. The big problem was that they had shortages of masks, and they knew if consumers started scrabbling to buy those respiratory masks, it would be a problem. Certainly the safest by far are respiratory masks. You know, they are protecting the person, not other people. You know, I'd like to if I thought I was in a situation where there was a threat, I'd like to be wearing a respiratory mask, please. You know, not just something that's been sold at consumer level. But it has been a question of this reluctance to say masks should be even used with casually, you know, and then suddenly, no, you must wear a mask in this situation. Once that was only said once supplies had been built up. But certainly respiratory masks are what you need for personal protection. Don't want to cause any mass consumer buying out there, but that's a fact.
We've got no delegates left. They're all out now buying buying up the rest of the stuff. Thanks very much, Adrian, and thanks also to delegates for their questions there. We may have others after Barbara's presentation. But for now, thank you, Adrian. If I can ask you to stop sharing your screen, and then I'll introduce Barbara. That's super. Thank you very much. Okay, so perfect timing. We will move on to our second speaker for the day, Barbara Shepard. Barbara has board-level experience of working in British fashion across all major UK high street retailers, specialising in coordinating and developing new business opportunities for both home and garment textile multi-line manufacturing businesses. Barbara is recognised as a sector specialist for garment manufacture, and she has an experienced understanding of both UK and global supply chain management. She's chair of the steering group for the Textiles Network and is head of business engagement at the Manchester Fashion Institute, which is part of Manchester Metropolitan University. In this role, she works with textile and fashion companies to support and develop business, and importantly, I believe, to develop research experience that transfers cost benefits to the industry sector. Now, she's going to talk to us about the impacts of COVID-19 and the Sustainable Development Goals in the textile supply chain. And I believe she's going to focus on a project recently undertaken by the university on the fitness for purpose of PPE. Barbara, can I hand over to you now, please?
Fine. I'll just check. I think I've got my microphone on. Yes, I have presented some work to a sustainability conference. A paper that was produced based on the work that I've done with the NHS in MFI was accepted in November and presented in Brazil. So I thought it was that was hard work because I had to work out how to do that and never did it before. There's a whole team collaboratively in MMU that have worked together on this project. This was a clinical need that was identified by the NHS, the team in Wythenshawe, about the actual design of the plastic apron that you've all seen on TV that everybody puts over their head. They sent a video through asking for help to see could anybody help sort out their issue. And it's something that we as the team at MFI, on the back of the work that we'd done with the NHS, if anyone has seen it, we've had a lot of feedback. We did some open sourced work right at the start of the pandemic where we deconstructed scrubs because we wanted to help UK-based manufacturing to sort PPE, because like everything else, it was all made offshore. The supply lines were cut, and we did very quickly, actually, we turned around that project in 12 weeks. It took longer to get a press release out there than it did for us to do the technical work. But on the back of this work at the Fashion Institute, then the NHS said, you know, the next problem came. That's what you're going to see on the video. And this work sort of snowballing. And I'll talk to you at the end of the video once Robin's played it to tell you what's happening and where we're going next with MFI and PPE. So over to you, Robin, if you want to just start the video.
Yep, sure, I'll do that now. Can you see that okay, Barbara?
Yeah, that's fine. Looks good. Good afternoon. I'm Barbara Shepard, Head of Business Engagement at the Manchester Fashion Institute at Manchester Metropolitan University in the United Kingdom. I will be presenting today with my colleague, Dr. Michelle Croston, and we are delighted to be able to present our work on COVID-19 on behalf of our university. Our project is titled Fit for Purpose, PPE Sustainable Design Evaluation in a Clinical Setting. The research challenge was presented to the university through an integrated group in the north of England that works with universities and clinicians to solve problems that they have in their day-to-day work. This was a 12-week project that a number of stakeholders worked together really quickly to come up with a solution that would solve a big issue for our local medical teams. The aims and objectives of our research were to evaluate the perceived acceptability of a redesigned PPE plastic apron in an acute healthcare setting during a pandemic. Two clear objectives: one, to survey staff on the suitability of the redesigned garment, but also to capture how the staff felt in terms of their own personal safety in association with the redesign of the apron.
You've already met my colleague, Barbara Shepard. My name's Michelle Croston. I'm a senior lecturer over in our nursing department with 20 years experience of working in infectious diseases and tropical medicine. Another member of the team is Professor Mark Jones, who provided leadership and support throughout the research process. The relationship of the research team during this COVID period enabled the smooth running of the project.
The project stakeholders. There were a number of key stakeholders involved in this project, initiated by the UK's National Health Service, the NHS. They approached the university, so that's us second on the list. But what was really key to this project was the actual collaboration that we had locally in Manchester. We work very closely at the university with the Greater Manchester Combined Authority that is responsible for supporting local manufacturing. So working with the team, we were able to work with a local Manchester-based manufacturer, Duo Plastics, in the actual development of the finished gowns. So we came up with a regional response to a regional problem, and the new gowns are going to be actually manufactured with us in Manchester. The academic theory that was applied in relation to this project centered around design thinking. The innovation frameworks that we used were we started off with a video supplied by the NHS to understand the end user's problems. We then surveyed the local NHS staff. We worked together in the university with the NHS teams to solve the problem of the actual issues that they had with contamination and PPE. We tried a number of different versions, all of this virtually because of COVID and the lockdown. We experimented and had a lot of collaborative work that we did together as groups of professionals, digitally and online. This was very much an interdisciplinary collaboration with everybody working together to solve the issue and to do it quickly in a 12-week time frame.
The process of the research took 6 stages. Stage 1, as you can see from the slide, was a co-designed online workshop with our clinical partners, Manchester Fashion Institute, the Department of Nursing and technical support to ensure that our users were represented throughout the process. There's also some pictures on the slide that demonstrate this process. Stage 2 was the data analysis. We developed surveys that were given to our end users to establish the benefits of the new proposed existing garment. This involves looking at behavioural and functional changes within the garment that was being redesigned. Stage 3 was the development of the production of the prototype. As you can see from the image on screen, there was lots of phases that this occurred. And again, just to remember that this all happened virtually. So the usual convention of us all getting together and trying these designs out was not possible, but we made really good progress via virtual means as well. Stage 4 was the manufacturing of the pilot sample, and Duo Plastics was responsible for this. Stage 5 was the garment wearer trial, followed by the final report and recommendations. The underpinning methodology for the project was a mixed method, observed design. So this was an evaluation survey. This was sent to the participants on the COVID-19 ward to explore their thoughts on the current available design of apron prior to the wearer trial. During the wearer trial, the redesigned apron was worn by the staff on the COVID-19 ward. A repeat evaluation of the survey was given to the participant to capture their perspectives and how it fit, and also whether their redesigned apron was fit for purpose. Within the wearer trial, a member of the research team, myself, was part of the gathering of data. So staff members involved in the wearer trial gave me verbal feedback on their usability of the garment. So here are the key findings from our study. So the key findings from the wearer trial was that overall participants reported feeling more confident in the new apron. A between subject t-test showed this difference was significant. Also, when asked to consider how safe they felt within the redesign of their apron, participants indicated they felt significantly safer in the new apron. And this is significant when you look at the COVID ward and the data that's emerging for healthcare professionals around this aspect of care. This was also reflected in how comfortable they felt in the redesign of the apron, alongside reporting that they felt more freer in the apron, that it felt kind of, it moved with them. That was some of the verbal feedback that came. This all also correlated with the feeling of it being less restrictive. And also that the redesign indicated that it was well received from the participants. And definitely these were some of the feedback that was given to me throughout the wearer trial.
The next stages of the research, we're taking the results from our 12-week trial and we're expanding those into an Arts and Humanities Research Council bid that will take this project to, will extend the project to a year-long analysis of 3 different wards in the NHS. We're going to extend the trial and run it for a week in a COVID-19 ward, an ICU ward, and a general ward. We're also involved in the follow-on research. We're looking at a policy review in relation to the UK procurement of PPE. And also we're looking to support local manufacturing so that we can produce our own PPE to support our local NHS in the northwest of England.
Barbara, do you have anything else that you'd like to add now, following on from the presentation?
Yeah, well, just to let everybody know that the bid's submitted, we're waiting for it to be reviewed. A lot of positive feedback. We've built a very good connection now with the team in the NHS. They're confident in what we can do, very responsive in terms of the speed, the fact that we did this very quickly, and in terms of how we're moving forward from a manufacturing point of view. This was, I think it's important to state, because it doesn't come across in the video, that Duo Plastics, who did the work for us, they aren't a plastic apron manufacturer. All of the kit currently, all of this stuff is currently imported from China. The UK manufacturer, the Manchester-based manufacturer, made surgical waste bags, so he could make plastics. He was, you know, he could manufacture that product, but not the apron. So what we're hoping to do is to work alongside them as the result of the bigger trial, to be able to secure funding so that they could buy the kit. The other big thing for us is we have a policy evaluation review unit at MMU, and I've been working with them. We put an initial piece of work out at the start of the pandemic to say that if we're going to support ourselves regionally, we have to have a change in UK purchasing policy. This is vital. Obviously, everything currently goes through a tender process, apart from all the stuff you've seen in the news, because in the pandemic that went to the wall. But you know, going forward, PPE has to be, in our opinion, it has to be procured against rest of the world and made in UK. Made in UK will cost more. We've done a lot of work to make sure that it's not going to be prohibitively expensive. We understand at MFI how garments are costed and what needs to be done, but we have to look at not the financial cost. There is a social cost associated to what we're doing. There's no carbon footprint. We're going to secure jobs in the UK. We're not looking to make something that's 10 times the price, but we all have to be realistic that it will cost us more in the UK, but what is the social cost of it? And then as a government, we have to realise there are certain products that we cannot make here. We don't have the manufacturing capability or the kit or the infrastructure. But a lot of this PPE product is, from a manufacturing point of view, we can do it. So give us an opportunity, and as government, allocate a percentage of the budget that must be bought British. This is the way to support the industry. And I know I come from a garment manufacturing background, but the number of calls I got from people from every sector of manufacturing in the UK when this thing kicked off and I asked for help. I had UK bedding manufacturers, I had non-woven people saying, we're here, how can we help? So, I mean, you know, for me today is really to let you all know the work that we're doing. I've also been appointed with Jeff, who I've worked with, who you've seen on the screen as a Greater Manchester Combined Authority. He's head of manufacturing for the team. We worked really well on the PPE together. We've both been appointed to the Northwest PPE task force. So I'm there, I'm knowing what's going on regionally. So, you know, I'm a voice for anybody in the network and the TI who wants to talk about what's going on. But, you know, we're all clear that things have to change, and that obviously is something that has to be done at government level. So really keen to take any questions about the work and how we managed to do it, and even if you can't do it now, you know, put an email through and I will come back to anybody, because this thing it's definitely moving forward, and I'm very positive that we can support it from a manufacturing capability in the UK, and I'm passionate about that. I really believe we can, and we should.
Absolutely, Barbara. Thank you so much indeed. If I can just remind people, if you want to ask Barbara or indeed Adrian any questions, if you can just post them on the chat or the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen now, that would be great. We've got 5 minutes or so left. What I was going to say to you, Barbara, and we talked a little bit about this before, the fact that there's obviously such a coordinated response in Manchester and around the north of England, care trusts. I wonder what the opportunities are to showcase the success of what's happening. Not just where do you go next, but how do you let everybody else know what you're doing, and so that there is a coordinated approach nationally as well as in the north.
Yeah, well, I know at the start of it, I got a lot of direct conversations with the teams at Imperial in London. They're very excited about what we're doing regionally in Manchester, and the fact that we communicate really well as a region here, a textile region. And yeah, I definitely think maybe that, you know, the Northwest TI can say this has worked well for us and how it worked as a lessons learned, and how do we connect and how do we do it. Yeah, I would be really up for doing something like that. And I think the Combined Authority as well, because, you know, they needed help. Their manufacturing expertise didn't come from a textile background. I did. So we worked. What does that mean? Help me, because, you know, there are people in particular jobs, they come from a different area of specialism, you know, and then the NHS have got confidence. They're not working on my project, but they had a question about something else, and it's, I'll ask the team at MFI because they know how to make things. It's people having confidence in each other, and you can't do that by email. You have to do that by, you know, working together and doing it collaboratively. And I think it's, to me, it's a cultural thing. We're very good at it in Manchester, and then we should share that, because I think going forward, everybody's in their own, everybody's got to control their own supply of PP and working together, particularly in textiles. For me, I see this as our Oscar moment, because in textiles, we're always considered the back of the bus for research money, or, you know, we're not the, you know, the aeronautical engineer, we're not car makers, but all of a sudden we're front of house, and we have to do something now to say, this is what we need, this is what we want, and this is what we can bring to the table.
Just excuse me while I have a cough.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Oh, I think we have a Q&A. I see one. There's a live one. Oh, it's from B. Frank Moore. I'll wait for you, Helen, don't worry.
I think Helen. Yeah, at the moment, because that's something that I've been talking about. You okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah, I can.
Yeah, you can hear me. Because I mean, globally, I think the textile industry has come so much to the forefront over the last 10 months or so. It's coming to people's heads, into people's minds, and as you mentioned, you know, aeronautics and other industries seem to get the funding way ahead.
Yeah.
Of us. And we do so much work across the globe, but especially in this region, and we tend to hide our light under a bushel. And I think, again, this is a time to shine, and we can help ourselves. We can. I think that's great. Absolutely great. We have B. Frank Moore is saying, you've looked at the comfort factor of the aprons, just going back to your presentation on the research, but did you compare performance of various materials?
Yeah, I can see that question, and also Paul's. Really good question, both of you. Basically, at the start, we were requested to match. We were requested to match the spec. So we worked with Geoplastics to match the spec, but then I spoke to the team there and I said, guys, are you working on anything sustainable? And they were. So they had gone off based on the initial request to match the current spec for the plastic apron. But once I'd said, is there anything you're working on? They're the sole supplier of a sugarcane derivative plastic that the majority of all of this waste is clinical waste, and it's burned. So the sugar-based plastic is zero carbon committing. So we're working, that is the base. So we've not only have we redesigned it, we have we are proposing a zero CO2 emitting plastic. So it's very difficult in this kind of things that, you know, and I know Simon's question before, you know, there are the requirements and this is what you have to match to, but we were able to do that. But because we asked, I asked the question, was there a sustainable alternative? And that's through Braskem in Brazil, which we're quite excited because this sustainable conference we went to was based in Sao Paulo. But it's a Brazilian based company, and Geoplastics have the sole contract for that, I think, in the UK. So not, you know, so that's a big plus for us. Sorry, that should have come across. You'll see it on the slide. It's Geo Green. It's a family owned local company in Manchester. They're very progressive and they have their own whole sustainability element of what they're doing. And we made sure that we incorporated that into the new design. Okay, there's another one then. Yeah,
the other one, oh, we have a third too.
Yeah, so manufacturing Ppe Masks. Well, it all depends. I had a lot of calls about this. I originally the Growth Hub said, Barbara, you know, what about a fashion mask? What do you think? And I said, yes, they'll all be doing it. So, and I think it was mentioned also earlier by Adrian, it's a question if it's, you know, it's a protective and you want it to look good, but if it's got respiratory, you know, requirements, it's a totally different thing. What raw material should be preferred in preparing? I think that depends on where you are in the world and the legislative requirements of what you're doing. I think we're pretty much, our standards are very high here in the UK, so I couldn't speak for other countries. I wouldn't have that knowledge base, but I would imagine, and I know speaking to the team in the Growth Hub, and when we've looked at the actual standards and requirements of what we currently have, there's a big job to be done here, because you know, that was before COVID. A lot of these standards are not fit for purpose. They need to be relooked at. And I think probably from a global perspective, that is a big piece of work that's going to have to be done. And I think there is also the whole question.
I'm wondering.
Yeah, sorry. The big issue here is, and it's coming like a tsunami, is, you know, we're the second biggest polluter on the planet. We're going to have all of the waste from this PPE. So, you know, how can we make it reusable, washable, whatever, but it's different PPE for different situations. So whether it's for you at home, or you're working, you know, going to the shops, or whether you're actually in a clinical situation, they are two different things. So, you know, I definitely think there's a big job to be done. Medical, especially for.
Oh, let's see, there is another question, but I just wonder if Adrian is still with us, whether he might have any views on the third question we had there.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I fully appreciate Barbara's passion, and I think it's brilliant that we're doing this here. The big problem that I see is in terms of disposal of these, you know, this is classed as medical waste, isn't it? Mm-hmm. You know, so basically, even if it's made from natural raw materials, it's just being incinerated. Is that correct? Or,
are you speaking about my apron, Adrian?
Well, I'm obviously, yeah, in a hospital situation, yeah.
Yes, the aprons that we are working on, they're considered clinical waste, and they're burned. Yeah,
so there's no reuse potential and such.
No, not on the apron, but I think these questions were about masks. The second one then was about, she was asking about, it's your area, she's asking about in manufacturing PPE mask, how important fashion can be considered.
Yeah, well, certainly it's a fantastic opportunity for sustainable materials with consumer masks, without a doubt. How would you go about getting the infrastructure so they could be disposed? It's a big question we've got in a lot of areas, isn't it? You know, that's the thing.
It is indeed.
To me, we have to be designing the sustainability into it from the get-go, you know, and then doing that at an affordable way. So, you know, there's no point if it's going to be 3 times the price of the current one, because nobody's, you know, that's just not going to work.
No, I mean, you certainly don't need 3-layer masks, you know, just for consumer waste.
Okay, I see Simon has another.
I don't know, the person that posed that particular question, I don't know if they can see the question. Answers, but some WHO regulations for non-medical applications, especially for local government, for face masks. So that's great. We've had 3 of you answering the questions there. Thank you so much. Do you know what? We're exactly on 5 o'clock. We're running out of time, I'm afraid. I want to thank both Barbara and Adrian so much for great presentations and for commenting and answering questions. And I also want to thank all the delegates that have joined us, and for the people who've posed questions as well. Just before I hand back to Stephanie, I'd just like to wish everybody a peaceful festive season that seems to be around the corner. It'll be here and it'll be gone again. We'll be probably back in lockdown again, wherever you are. But wherever you are, please keep safe and stay happy. And with that, I'm going to pass back to Stephanie, who I think is going to talk a little bit about what's going to happen tomorrow evening. Thank you so much.
Yeah. No, thank you, Helen. for chairing. Of course, Adrian and Barbara, brilliant to have you today, and it's great to have your support and support of Manchester Met University, who are corporate members. 2 excellent presentations, very topical, I'm sure you all agree, and fascinating to hear about the local as well as the global perspective. PPE, it's just something we're all talking about at the moment. And obviously, I don't think this is a topic that will go away either, and it shouldn't either. So just a gentle reminder as well, for those that are still on, you haven't registered for tomorrow's webinar, please join us. You're required to sign up for each individual webinar. So tomorrow we have Richard Delahunty, who is the Global Portfolio Director for Physical Sciences and Engineering at Taylor and Francis, and one of the Institute's publishing partners. Richard will be talking about publishing in academic journals and the process that's involved. We also have Holly Morris, who is a chartered member of the Institute and also a surgical registrar. Holly has recently co-authored a review of the medical textile sector in Textile Progress entitled Medical Textiles. And this has been very well received. She'll be talking about her experience of publishing with the Textile Institute for the first time. The idea behind the webinar tomorrow really is to reach out to our members, to get people involved in publishing, reviewing, or authoring, whether you've published before or whether it's your first time. We want to encourage people to come to us and publish. But again, as I mentioned yesterday, following the webinar series, we'd also welcome your feedback on what topics from across our industry members would like to hear about. We're planning for the next webinar to take place in February. So please email Robin Ingham, who you'll have met during your registration process, and let her know, what you'd like to hear about. And then also to close as well, I'd just like to wish everybody a good evening and a good day, depending on where you are in the world, and hope you'll be joining us tomorrow. And please pass on the details about the webinar to your fellow members who we welcome. So thank you for your time, and we will hopefully see you back tomorrow. So thank you and good evening.